Hi, welcome back to another edition of Inside Great Lakes Sailing. My name is Greg Norman. We are fortunate to have with us today Grace Pytell, who is a connoisseur of sailing. She is a former junior racing director, an ocean cruiser, now a 50-ton captain working up in the Traverse City area. And Grace, first of all, welcome to the show. We want to kind of go in chronological order, but my first question for you is, what is it that you love so much about sailing?
I think the number one thing I love is that there's so many different types of sailing and many different ways to go sailing, because you can go cruising, you can go racing, dinghies, keel boats, solo, double-handed with a team, all kinds of stuff. And every time I go sailing, I learn something new, and that's never going to stop. So there's lots of opportunities to do something different.
You come from a sailing family. You grew up, I'm assuming, sailing, because I know Dad belongs to Crescent, Mark Pytell, and you probably grew up on a boat, if I'm not mistaken.
Kind of, yeah. My mom said that, because I asked her, when did I start sailing? And she said I was in the baby seat down below in the Flying Scot, and they would just drop me down there, and I'd go to sleep, and they'd sail and do whatever. So I've been on, in, and around boats my whole life.
So you kind of took the normal route. You went through junior sailing and sailed with Dad, may sail with Mom and Dad, those kinds of things.
Yep. Do junior sailing, and then Crescent club races, and then DRY races, and there's just a little bit of everything.
The one of the thread questions I ask is, do you remember when it dawned on you that this was an obsession? You remember what age, or maybe you never had that metamorphosis?
I don't think so, because I think it's always been ingrained in my blood, and I was never ever going to stop sailing. And elementary school, I'd be in school, and it'd be winter time, I'd be drawing sailboats on my notes and stuff like that, and I'd be like, is it summer yet? And so it's never really stopped ever.
I asked the question because even my own son, he was on a sailboat when he was a really small kid. I can't get him on a boat now if I took him with a gun. He just doesn't particularly like sailing, and not everybody does. It's all relative to what you kind of enjoy.
Yep.
You're a local girl. You went to what high school?
Fraser High School, and then Oakland University for my college degree.
Now, I guess I got to ask you, you got a degree in biology from Oakland, and you ended up as a professional sailor. So it's the vocation was always really clear about what you wanted to do. I mean, nothing against being a biologist, but you still took a different route, right?
No, I didn't think I'd end up here. If I told my 18-year-old self that I'd be captaining boats now, I'd be like, you gotta be crazy. Like, there's no way. I didn't think that this would end up being a vocation, a career path at this point in my life, but things kind of fell into place the way they did, and here I am right now.
Okay. You like cruising better than racing, or is it racing better than cruising?
50-50. Depends on the mood. I definitely am very competitive, and so racing is the competitive outlet. But also, I could go sit at anchor and read a book for 3 days, and that sounds just as awesome. It depends on the situation.
When I got a chance to interview Gary Jobson, he was a youth national champion, and he also was on the JV basketball team where he sat the bench. He said the best thing that ever happened to him as an athlete was having to sit on the bench as this JV athlete, knowing he had this prowess as a junior sailor. He said he learned a lot from that. Did you play any other sports besides sailing?
Yeah, I grew up competitively swimming. My parents decided that if I was going to sail, I better learn how to swim, and then so I and swim well. So I've been swimming my whole life. Did track, hated it because I hate running. I played water polo in college because I was tired of swimming, but wanted to swim a little bit. So I probably did, soccer and softball when I was a lot younger, but for the most part, water-themed sports.
I have to use my standard joke here. I quit playing water polo because my horse stopped drowned. Anyway, that's a bad joke. I get it. You were the junior sailing director at Crescent for a while.
Head coach. I think when I was coaching, it was, Renee, my mom at one point, Mrs. Sesky, and John Walton. they were the directors, and I was coaching at the time, and yeah.
Now, one of the first steps, one of the first big steps you took out was you decided to take Dad's boat, if I'm not mistaken, and go cruising all the way down the Mississippi and all the way. So let's kind of talk a little bit about that. How old were you when you made the decision to do that?
Yeah, so the Great Loop. My best friend Emily, she was in junior sailing at Crescent with me, and so we were super close, sailing 420s and lasers and everything. And when we were both in college, she found a link to a blog to these two girls, Katie and Jessie, who did the Great Loop they left from Northport, Michigan, and they took 2 years to do it, small sailboat, and really well-written blog. And so I read that. We both read the whole thing. We're like, well, that's pretty cool. And then we both graduated, and we were gearing up to go to grad school, and the idea kind of popped up. We're like, if they can do it, we can do it. And we kind of joked about it for a while, and I started missing all of my grad school application deadlines, but that was also partly because I wasn't quite sure what I wanted to do for grad school. I'm like, well, I'm not going to spend the money to go to school if I'm not exactly sure what I'm going to do with it. And so we both agreed, long story short, like, okay, yeah, we're going to do this. And it took off from there. So that was, I think, the fall of 2016. And so we reached out to Katie and Jessie, because we're like, well, we're going to ask them how to do it. And so Jessie responded and helped us with a lot of our questions. And she was like so excited. She's like, well, you guys have already made the decision to go. And you have way more experience starting off than we did. So you're going to be fine. And we're like, okay, we can do this. Yeah, so I think it was specifically around Christmas of that year. We're like, okay, there's no going back at this point. We're committed. And yeah, so that started the process of, okay, now we've got to make lists and attempt to make a budget, and can we afford this, and can we fix everything, and all the planning was a lot. Yeah, and then that spring, there was a lot of time spent in the boatyard. We did just so much work, and it was kind of funny because growing up sailing, I didn't end up doing a lot of actual boat work, and so I learned so much because I had to like rebuild the head and replumb the boat and redo a lot of the electrical and gel coat and fiberglass and woodwork and all this stuff. Oh my God, it was a nightmare. I look back now and I'm like, thinking of all the lists that we had on the cabin, there was like 8 lists in a row of all the stuff we had to do, and I'm like, I don't know if I could do it. Well, I could do it now again, but wow, it was a lot of all the work that we did.
Did you ever figure out how much it cost you just on the boat construction to get it ready?
I think we ended up spending between like $3,000 and $5,000.
Okay.
But that's also buying a lot of equipment, safety equipment, and upgrades. Because my family has had the boat for a while, but we hadn't taken it cruising before, so a lot of the cruising gear we had to upgrade and get ready, and stuff like that, or something like that. I don't know.
If I've got a 30-0 day and I decide to go on this great adventure, which is kind of what you did, what is it that my regular boat that goes, as long as I stay close to shore and the Great Lakes, I'm fine. What is it? What are the kind of things that you have to upgrade? Rigging, I'm sure, but what is it that you guys did?
Yeah, rigging, we had to move all the clutches back. Everything was up at the mast, and safety thing, we moved it all back into the cockpit, which was good. The stove, we had to get the stove running because our stove hadn't been working in probably 20 years. We didn't really know, so we had to completely rebuild that system, rebuild the head system, and there's just a lot of stuff that you don't use on a day sail that all of a sudden needs to be working very well. Right. We had to upgrade our radio. You also want to get a pretty solid med kit. That's a really important thing. Extra safety, like flares and distress signals and stuff like that. We had a spot tracker from Garmin InReach that we borrowed, but something to emerge, like satellite contact or satellite communication is was really nice to have, because if you're not in cell service, you want to be able to reach out to somebody. Yeah, what else did we do? I don't know. We did a lot of stuff.
When you're figuring out how much it costs a day, when you're starting to do your budgets and those things, did you guys ever come up with those kind of numbers?
During the trip,
Yeah.
I think we didn't get per day, but we got per month, and it averaged out to about $1,000 a month.
Okay.
And there were a couple bigger expenses that we probably could have avoided, but there was also some months where we almost didn't spend any money. We also anchored out all the time, because that's free. And then we'd go to a marina about once a week or so. And that was like, okay, we desperately need showers and laundry and internet and fresh food.
How do you shower in a saltwater environment when you're out? That would drive me nuts, because I could not. If I can't take a shower in the morning, I don't think I could function.
We got used to being smelly. Because we ended up going to the Bahamas for 3 months. And so that's very clean water, so you just jump in the ocean and wash like normal, and then you're just a little bit salty. And then you could spare, because we had a pretty limited freshwater capacity, so we could spare half a gallon to rinse off all the salt at the end, and you just always are salty.
What was the best part of the trip? What was the thing that pleased you the most?
Oh man,
You're explaining to me for the first time. I took this adventure.
what was the best thing? There's a lot of good things. Learning the goodness of other people, other sailors in the community. We got a lot of help from other people, and also just everything will work out in the end.
Okay.
You have to just trust that things are going to be okay, and they will be okay.
If you're explaining to two rookies that were about to take the trip, as was explained to you, what would you tell them that you didn't anticipate that was maybe not the nicest part of it? And maybe not the ugliest part, but you know what I'm saying? The most uncomfortable. What was the thing that you didn't expect?
Yeah. Let's see. Gosh, I don't know, because we didn't leave with a lot of expectations.
Okay.
And just
Why?
make sure you have, because there's no way to expect what's going to happen. Right. We had never lived aboard before, and we hadn't lived together before, so you just have to leave with an open mindset, and whatever happens is going to happen.
You make an interesting point. Most people that would go out on the travels, if you watch the travel logs, they all can give you a big, huge mission statement as to why they left and why they took off. You're saying you really had no expectations, and just kind of there was an open canvas.
Yep. We had no idea, okay, how far are we going to make it? Are we going to come back, first off? We might hit the ocean and just make a left and see you later. You just have to see where the adventure is going to take you and enjoy the ride along the way.
Do you still have, you had an open ocean cruising, obviously, to the Bahamas, but is it still in your heart to want to get across the Atlantic or go to the Pacific or do a global?
Yeah, I definitely want to cross an ocean someday. Absolutely, it's on my list. Yeah.
Now you guys had a 30-foot, 32-foot?
28.
28?
28 and a half, technically.
Kind of boat?
It's a Columbia 8.7.
Okay. If you went again, would you get something bigger?
Yeah, definitely. I get on the boat now, and I'm like, wow, this thing's tiny. And it worked for the two of us and for what we were doing and our current lifestyle at the time. But now I'm like, wow, I really appreciate more storage space and a couple nicer things. And now that I've been on a lot of charter boats and other bigger boats, it's like, okay, I'd have a better idea of how I'd want to lay a boat out. But I could do it on a small boat again. I don't know if I would probably be happy, but some space is nice.
I couldn't imagine sleeping on my own boat on a regular basis over a month or two in hot weather without air conditioning. Like sleeping in your own sweat every night. It just doesn't excite me. Maybe it's because I'm old. I don't know. And again, I don't want to be chauvinist here, but did it ever dawn on you about safety? Two girls traveling in a Dad. What was Dad's thoughts? Because I'm sure he's worried about his daughter more than anything. Not that Mom doesn't. Mom worries as much. Don't misunderstand the point. But
there's a lot of questions of safety. A lot of people were like, take a gun, and that was something we didn't want to we weren't that confident in taking one in all the different state regulations, and we did a lot more of just planning ahead and making good decisions. We knew we had other ways to defend ourselves if it really came to that point. And, we're in America 90% of the trip, so it's not like you're going to find pirates on the high seas. And then, we could lock ourselves in the boat. We would check the guidebook, and, if some places were known to be sketchy, we would not go there. And we definitely, the interesting thing was we found that we'd go out to dinner or something, and people would be like, oh, that's so cool, blah, 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 blah. Where's the boat? And we're like, we don't want to tell you that because, do you tell everybody where your home address is? So, but just out of curiosity, and they're excited, but we did a lot of it's over there somewhere. And that would kind of help our peace of mind of saying, okay, I'm not going to tell you exactly where we are, where we're going, and too many details, just so that creepy people can't find us.
I would think that even guys traveling through the Bahamas would still take the same precautions, just because. It's not. I don't think it's completely unique to women. Certainly is. Did you ever have a case where it was close, or was it safe most of the time?
No, it was safe most of the time. We never felt like we were in great danger. And we grew up in the Detroit area, so you know how to not be stupid and don't go down the dark alley by yourself at night. Right. Hello. So there's some common sense stuff like that.
For those looking at this interview, I don't think they realize just how much of a trend buster you are. You're a strong woman, and you have your own opinions, and that's great. That's wonderful. And I think that it'd be a little more difficult if you were a little more tentative about stuff. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Well, I think
and we grew into that too. And when you leave, and all of a sudden we were the only people responsible, you realize it pretty quick, and so you learn how to take care of yourself regardless.
Any terrible perils in terms of sailing, storms you ran into in the middle of the Atlantic?
No, not that much. I think our worst weather on the entire trip was on Lake Michigan. Lake Michigan I've sailed a lot of places, and that is my most respected body of water because things can turn so quickly. Because we got, all those shelf clouds comes across the lake and you think you're going to die, but we got hit by one of those, and that was only 3 weeks after we started, and we were like, but it was fine.
You left the Detroit area, then went around Huron and then down to Lake Michigan and then through Chicago.
Yep.
Down the Mississippi and.
Not the Mississippi. We were only on the Mississippi for about 100 miles. It's the Illinois River, part of the Mississippi, up the Ohio, and then down the Tennessee-Tombigbee waterway, it's east of the Mississippi. A little bit nicer, less barge traffic, so it's a more friendly waterway.
Now, you also kept a really good blog. There's a lot of really terrific information, and if you want to do some reading. Where is it online, just so we know where we can find it?
Oh, man. The link is really long. I think you might want to just post it, but it's Emily
at the end of this, we'll put that link up at the end.
Yeah, I don't know. We don't know what to do, but it was Emily and Grace Go Sailing.wixsite.com/greatloop, because that was what they allowed us to do with the free version.
Well, having not met you at the time, we actually have 6 degrees of separation. 5 years ago, we had a chance in the fall to run into some people at Bell River that we knew from Markley, up on the Clinton River, and they had just moved from Markley to Crescent. We went over on a Monday to talk to them. It was one of those weekend things. We had taken a sail to Bell River, and we knew them, so we talked to them a little bit, told us about Crescent. They said, why don't you come over and have a conversation? So Crescent invited us down for a night. We did. Turns out we stayed in the slip that you had vacated on the outer wall. So we immediately loved Crescent, thought it was really terrific, and away we go. We became members. Come to find out, we have a nephew who started a blog much like what you did called Sailing Solianis, and it turns out you ran into them in Mobile, Alabama. Thanks. So having not met you at
small world,
it stayed in your slip, and then you run into a relative far away. In fact, one of the meetings, your dad was sitting behind us, and I got up and I said, you believe this or not, because he would give us monthly updates at the membership meetings. And you had run into Kirk and Lauren.
Yep.
Down on
that was that was in the beginning of their trip too. They had just left Lake Michigan,
Yeah.
and we were in Mobile together the night when it snowed there, and that was that was a chilly week.
Well, your trip there seems to be a sort of a trend that you get a sailboat and you travel around, and when you don't use your sailboat, you end up living in a van, sort of having this gypsy life, if you will. And now, fortunately, we work in a world where everybody can be mobile. And you can work from your house. This conversation is a good example of that. And I think it's really terrific. We were all ski bums, so we'd get in our van and we'd go out west, but you get a chance to, at your age, before you have families. Kirk and Lauren, as we were talking, they're about to ready to have a child. So that kind of changes the process, but it was the 6 degrees of separation. I find it to be really interesting.
Yeah. The sailing world is a very small community.
It is. Okay, so you take this great trip, and it's wonderful. And somewhere along the line, you've decided to become a boat captain. Can you kind of explain the process of it?
Yeah, it was pretty early on. I remember going down some river, and it was freezing cold, and yeah, we left too late. It was absolutely freezing and miserable and kind of damp and whatever, but I was sitting up there kind of first thing in the morning with a cup of coffee, cruising down the river, and I'm like, this is better than any other day in the office, and I think I can do this for a living, and I'll figure out how to do that. And that was probably only 2 or 3 months into the trip that I kind of had it in the back of my head that I wanted to do this. And yeah, and so it's always, towards the end of a great trip like that, a lot of cruisers have the same issue of, oh my God, what's next? What am I going to do after this? Because that becomes your whole life and your lifestyle, and how do you go back to land life and transition? And so I at least had something of like, okay, I'm going to not totally go back to land, but I have an idea of what I'm going to do at the end of this, and I have to figure out how to do that once I got home. I didn't think about it too much, and then once I got home, I was like, okay, crap, how do I get a captain's license? And I went from there.
Talk a little bit about the captain's license. And how hard is it to get? What kind of work do you have to do? What sort of goes into the qualifications for it?
Yeah, so it's a lot of paperwork. The application packet's like this thick by the time you turn it in. And a lot more of it's just the lengthy application, physical, drug test, security card, background check, all this stuff, and also your sea service forms. The U.S. Coast Guard doesn't do a practical exam. They just do everything based on your prior experience. So you record all of your prior boat history, have the owners or someone as a witness sign off on all of your past sailing and the areas you've sailed and how much you've sailed or boated. You can be motoring too. And then the Coast Guard reviews all of that, and once you turn it in, and then they'll say, okay, you qualify for this level. And you also have to take an exam as well. Sorry, that's important. And then you can take an exam directly through the Coast Guard, which I hear is more difficult because it's a lot of random questions, or you can go through a certified course, which is a little bit easier because you have someone teaching you the material, and then you turn in your test results, your exam results, and then all of that, the Coast Guard says, okay, you can have this level license and these areas.
You take a class. What kind of time frame does it take to get through getting your license?
I did it extremely quickly, but I think the entire process from I'm going to do this to me mailing my application packet was about a month and a half, okay. Which is fast because all I had to do at that point in my life was put the boat away for the winter and find something to do. And I had at that time an offer to go sail in the Caribbean. So I was like, well, as soon as I get this done, I can go to the Caribbean. I was very motivated. But I think like Emily is getting her license right now, and she started it probably in May, and she's still working on it. So it's kind of different for every person because you can do it at your own pace. But it usually takes a couple more months.
The license you have currently is for things like large sailboat charters, like if you went to Traverse City and went out on a bigger boat and they take folks. Mm-hmm. This is not give me an idea what a 50-ton boat looks like in terms of your license.
50 ton. Let's see. It goes by volume. There is, like most of the boats that we sail, monohulls in the 35 to 45 foot range or so, those are only about 18 tons. There is a schooner in Traverse City, which they didn't rig the schooner. I was supposed to actually do some work on the drive the schooner this summer, but COVID happened. But that's a 50-ton boat, and I think it's 50 feet on deck and 76 overall. So it's a pretty big boat. It's a large boat. I don't think I'm going to drive anything more than 50 tons, at least not for a while. So you can do a lot with 50 tons. You can do a lot with 25 tons.
Does the license go by 50 to 100, 150?
There's the 6-pack, which is a easier level, but it's smaller boats. And I think they do, I want to say 50. There's 25, 50, and 100, and there might be something less than 25, I don't remember. And then once you're beyond 100, you're getting into more commercial vessels and going to the Merchant Marine Academy, freighters, tugs, stuff like that.
That becomes almost yours is a career, but it becomes a little more involved.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
We want to kind of get around to this subject. Any conversations about seeing a female captain? Does anybody have any comments this summer?
Mostly good.
No. If they did, that's great, obviously.
Yeah, so I'm working with the Great Lakes Sailing Company in Traverse City, and there's myself and one other lady captain. The rest of the captains are male, but everyone's usually pretty excited. I'm also pretty young for doing what I'm doing. I'm usually everyone's daughter's age.
Okay.
But they're usually quite impressed that I've made it to this level. But it's because of the loop and the prior racing experience. That's not average, but just in general, there are fewer lady captains. The stereotypical role as a captain is some dude who's kind of got an ego and it's like, oh, I'm the male, I'm the person in charge of this boat, roar, and they're just running their own show. But
guy my age,
change that.
Guy my age with a beard. No, I get that.
Mm-hmm.
Can you make a living at being a captain at the level you're at right now?
Mm-hmm. That's what I'm doing.
I ask because I don't want somebody to think it's a summer job like you're a lifeguard.
No, there's a lot of certification that goes into it, and with the teaching, because I can do skipper charters and deliveries, but also I'm certified to teach through the American Sailing Association. So there's a lot of certifications that go through that, and a lot of people who do what I do combine it with other jobs. But that's all I do, and you're never going to get rich doing this stuff, but it's enough I never have to go on vacation because I get to go sailing all the time. So
the transient nature of, you could obviously go to warm weather in the winter and find employment, which makes it kind of cool. So it changes, from the perspective, there's always going to be some opportunity somewhere.
Yep.
We're not sailing a lot in January in Traverse City,
right?
But, other than Florida and California, I know they do a lot of sailing in the winter times in those.
Yeah.
The one question, and it's something we've interviewed. I think this will be the 30th show, and we probably have had 95% men. And you're probably the first, I think, if not mistaken, the first female we've interviewed, and that wasn't by design. It was just because that's just. Kind of took this on as a publicity thing for junior sailing, and we're trying to get some folks. Why are there not more females at a higher level, or is it just maybe I haven't discovered them yet? Maybe talk to that a little bit about sort of breaking the glass ceiling. Right.
Yeah. It's a very hot topic recently. When Tracy Edwards did the Whitbread with the first all-female crew in the 80s, that was breaking a huge glass ceiling. But after she did that, not much changed in the sport, which is weird. And so recently...
Why do you think?
I don't know. That's a great question. And we keep going over and over that. I think a lot of it is the male stereotype of you're going to get on a race boat or you're going to get on a boat, some dude's going to yell at you, and you don't get an opportunity to learn. And what I find is that women are just as capable or more, but it's giving women the opportunity to build confidence to do what they want to do on the boat. And because I look around at sailing and DRYA right now, and even with all this stuff going on, the last two versions of the Volvo Ocean Race finally had first female crew, all female crews in forever. And now it's just starting to change, but we still only have maybe one or two ladies on each DRYA boat. And that's insane. Why is that? And maybe women aren't as competitive, but also I think you just need to give them the opportunity to build confidence and have that chance to maybe actually trim the jib. Stop putting your newer crew on the rail and say, it's just a Wednesday night race. How about you have someone else do different jobs on the boat, and instead of screaming at them, take the time to educate, and how do you do it safely? How do you do it quickly? And it goes two ways as well, because if you're sailing on a boat and you want to learn more, but you don't say anything, no one's going to just, plop you up and say, hey, why don't I teach you this? You have to kind of demand for it and say, hey, I want to learn how to do the pit. I want to learn how to drive the boat. I want to learn how to do this or that. And make yourself heard. Don't sit around and wait for someone to change it for you. Do something about it, because that's going to make a difference of putting yourself in a better position on the boat.
We are in this social revolution at the moment, Me Too, and all the other things that go on. Most sports have made great changes. At the delicacy of angering some of my friends, sailing is an old white man sport.
Mm-hmm.
And
that's the perception.
It is, and partly because old white men can afford boats to some extent, or yacht club memberships. Mm-hmm. And I still see even in this show we're doing, some of the conversations I've had with people that I scratch my head and go, are you really that dumb? And I don't mean to anger somebody, but my point to it is, maybe because this is one of the last sports still with a bunch of white guys involved, it has something to do with that social change and not coming as fast as it should. That's certainly not true in other sports I'm involved in. And they just would not allow the landscape to take that long.
Right.
Women's lacrosse, and literally in the last 5 years, women's lacrosse was in the 1950s 5 years ago, and we've caught up 30 years in 5 because surprisingly more men were coming into women's lacrosse wanting them to get better instead of listening to a bunch of old white women who wanted to keep the sport with girls wearing wool skirts and not running around very fast. So it's prejudice doesn't look at anything other than what it stares at. It's not always just white men. It's up and down the board.
Yeah, I think a lot of that is the perception that, it's expensive is, I think, a big one, and it's the boys' club at the yacht club. We need to work harder to make it more accessible to people who think it's not accessible. Like, I don't have that much money, but I get to go sailing all the time, and I still get to do a lot of racing. And that's the thing, is you can make your way into the sport, but also, what Harry, you know what I'm talking about, with the Community Sailing Center. Detroit is one of the few big cities that doesn't actually have a very strong, vibrant community sailing program. And that is a huge accessible point for people who can't go to the yacht club and think that they can't afford the yacht club membership. So that's one thing that's helping change the course. Also, people, I don't think, realize that yacht club memberships for young people are actually very inexpensive. I don't pay a lot for Crescent's membership. Almost every single club on the lake has very cheap memberships for the young people. And then, if you have cheap memberships and club boats, that's another good way for people to get into it. And then, but we also, on the yacht club side, need to mentor people coming in who want to learn how to sail and get better, and say, hey, maybe let me take you out and let's do some sailing, and let's help the people that are trying to come in. But it's making it more accessible, helping the people that want to learn, and putting the people, give them responsibility, and then they're going to run with it.
I think sometimes too, communications across the board is lost because everybody sort of, you come to Crescent, you come to Grosse Pointe Yacht Club, it's the same guys who've been together for a long time. They're all friends. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's it. But it doesn't lead necessarily or lend itself to expansion.
Uh-uh.
And if it did, there wouldn't be a push for membership all the time. You know, we did something as simple as on the weekends this past year for junior sailing, allow the kids to come down to the facility with no instruction, but still had coaches there just to make sure kids were safe, and just go out and sail. Just get in the boat and go, and you're not stay in the bay. And we were packed by the end of the summer because it was a free chance for the kids to sail where they didn't have to rent boats, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
And it was, I keep pitching the idea of sandlot sailing. Well, how many, in my era, you went down to the local playground and you played, and there was no adults. Everything now has to be supervised, and heaven forbid we have those discussions. I just see so many young women, sometimes I think in all sports, they just don't get those opportunities that they might, and it's unfortunate. But hopefully, the fact that we're talking about this in 2020 still angers me a little bit, because it just doesn't. I'm not one of those old. I'm an old fat white guy, but I'm not one of those guys from that standpoint. I hope it's better by the time you get to be my age. I think that's something that's beneficial for your daughters if that ever occurs. I don't mean by my soapbox, but I think that's something that needs to get talked about. You know?
Yep.
Yeah. How do you think we improve it? Just by keep talking, communication?
Yeah. Keep bringing it up. Make it accessible. Make it welcoming. Make it a lot more welcoming than it is. And then I think another big point too is let the ladies figure it out too. When you're teaching someone on a boat, don't grab something out of their hands, because that just tells them that they're not good enough. Let them, okay, you're going around a mark, who cares? Give her another 5 seconds to pull the halyard in or something, because being able to do it on your own is gonna help reinforce confidence and doing it more often. And say, make it fun, because if it's not fun, you're getting yelled at the whole time, like, you're not gonna come back.
Right.
That's lame. No.
Failure is a great teacher.
I'm sorry?
Failure is a great teacher.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't fail, you can improve. I mean, that's
Yep.
just to embrace that. I joke all the time. I failed everything we've ever done, but you stay at it long enough to kind of to keep forward, to keep moving. So what's in your next 5 years? Where are you headed?
No, good question. I don't know. It's been going season by season at this point. I think this year I finally was like, okay, I'm going to do, because I'm normally in Grenada in the wintertime. Okay, I'm going to do Grenada in the winter. I'm going to be in Michigan in the summer, and I'm going to go back to Grenada, and it was going to be great. And then COVID happened. So, yeah, I don't know. But at least for now, while I'm still young and while I still can keep doing sailing stuff, and yeah, I don't know.
With the strong voice that you have you considered I'm not sure what avenue it would take, but have you considered working with U.S. Sailing, or working with maybe an organization or two that may exist, and I don't even know if they exist, with sort of female promotion of the sport of sailing?
Yeah, it's definitely in my head of, what if we had women's only sailing classes in the area? That would be big. That's a huge thing, because I've heard from other ladies who have learned how to sail, like having a lady captain and a lady teacher instead of a male has made a huge difference. And there's less pressure to do absolute best. So that's definitely in the back of my head, is what can I do locally to make it better, because there's definitely a need. So it's in the works, maybe, probably.
Like anything else, you're going to let grow it one sailor at a time. You can't take on the world. You have to do it, one body at a time, as like any other growth. Right. If I missed anything, is there anything we haven't talked about?
Oh, I don't think so. I don't know.
No, I'm just asking.
Yeah.
Good. Well, listen, I really appreciate the interview, and I know you're going to send some more good, solid subjects our way with some other folks, and give us some insight to some new shows. I appreciate that a ton. It was a real pleasure talking with you. It's wonderful to see. I coached young women for a long time in college for lacrosse, and I know, having never had a daughter nor a sister, when I meet young ladies like yourself, it makes my heart feel good, because you realize that there's a bunch of really terrific folks out there. So that's kind of a left-handed compliment, but you get my point. Anyway,
thank you.
that said, I appreciate your time, and we'll get this posted. Thanks again.
Sounds good.